Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be Part 40, Chapter 40. Izuku is in the spare room in the on-campus apartment when his guardians return home. He's loading up with little belongings he keeps in the guest room upstairs to take down to his dorm room. He knows his guardians have said that they aren't going to give Eri the room upstairs, but it still doesn't make sense to him. They'd been sleeping in the living room on futon since the little girl had been released from the hospital. Wouldn't it just be easier if Izuku was downstairs with everyone else where he was supposed to be instead of up in the living room? It defeats the purpose of the spare room when no one's using it. He could sleep downstairs, and Eri could take the spare room, and then Shoda and Hisashi would both be good to return to their own bedrooms as well. Simple. Izuku grabs the last book off his desk, the newest book that he'd borrowed from the library for Oboro. This one's a mystery novel, which the ghost had been bouncing on his heels over when he'd spotted the title on the spine of the book nestled on the shelf. Oboro himself is watching with a sour look, perched on the edge of his bed. "I don't understand why you're so insistent that you give up your room." The ghost sighs, leaning back against outstretched arms. He's pouting, but Izuku chooses not to look over and acknowledge it. "You know they're not going to like this, right?" "Eri needs somewhere to sleep," Izuku mutters, turning to set the book in the box beside Oboro. "She's sleeping on a futon in the living room, Oboro. That's no way for a little girl to live. She's been held captive and abused, tortured. She needs her own safe space." "And that safe space needs to be yours?" "I don't need 3 bedrooms. Izuku shakes his head. "I don't get what the big deal is. I hardly sleep up here anyways. I don't need this room. It's a spare. Someone else can use it more than I do. So what's the problem? You put guests in a spare room. Eri's a guest and she needs the room." "It's not a spare. It's yours." "That I hardly use," Izuku refutes with a blank expression. "That practically makes it a spare." "What about when your classmates go home for the weekend? What about holidays? You come up here when Sho and Zashi can't leave campus. Where will you sleep when that happens if Eri takes your room?" "In my dorm." Izuku furrows his brow in confusion. "Isn't that obvious?" "Alone, when the rest of your peers are home with their guardians and families?" The ghost looks upset for some reason. Izuku doesn't really understand. "You don't see how that's wrong? Why they're worried about this? About you?" "No," Izuku admits honestly. "Everyone will have a bed, and Eri will be close when she needs them, and they'll help her like they did me. She needs people that she can trust, adults that she can trust, and Shoda and Hisashi can be that for her. I'm a big boy, Oboro. I can sleep in the dorms by myself. Besides, it's not like they're haunted or anything, and if we're being honest, you're usually where I am at night, unless Shoda is on patrol or something. I'll be fine." The ghost's lips twitch a smile before he forces the expression back into a pout. "Don't use humor as a distraction. You're separating yourself from them." "I am not." Izuku rolls his eyes as he finally moves to the bed, grabbing the paw print pillow and the tiny green cat toy from the arcade and settling them both into the box as well. "I'm being logical and finding a solution to a problem. They're my teachers. It's not like I could separate myself from them even if I did try. I see Shoda in homeroom every morning, and he's still the heroics teacher, which is all afternoon, and I have English with Hisashi for an hour every morning. How is that pulling away?" "I swear, sometimes you sound just like Shoda. Listen, you're not pulling away from your teachers, Zuko. You're pulling away from your guardians." The ghost interjects, heaving a sigh as he pushes himself back up, straightening his arched spine as he regards the teenager with narrowed eyes. "There's a difference, one that I don't think you understand." Izuku scrunches his face up as he processes the words before he's shrugging. It makes sense, but still, he's not pulling away. He'll only be a couple of floors away. It's not like he's moving buildings or towns away. And they'll need to focus on Eri, not him. He doesn't want to be a distraction, so it's probably for the best anyways. She's still so young, and she's gone through something traumatic. "Why are we even arguing about this?" Izuku sighs. "This makes the most sense, and I know Shoda and Hisashi don't agree, but it does make the most sense. Like I said, once all this stuff is gone, it's just a normal spare room again. I'll just bring it all downstairs, and then it's not mine anymore. No problem." Yes, problem. We're arguing over this because you're being dense, and you can't see what's right in front of you." The ghost huffs out, arms crossing over his chest. "You seem to think that it's best for everyone if you just step back, but you're the only one who thinks that. Have you ever stopped to think that there may be a reason they're not backing down?" "And what reason might that be?" Izuku challenges, crossing his own arms over his chest and matching the ghost's stance. "Everyone keeps saying no, but no one's explaining why it's so wrong." "It's your room," the ghost tells him once again, suddenly sounding so defeated. His arms drop to his sides like all his energy has been sapped out of his body. Izuku hesitates for a second before matching the ghost's body language once again. The ghost frowns down at his hands before looking up at Izuku once more. You're giving something that's yours up so easily because you think Eri needs it. And listen, I don't disagree. I know exactly what you know, remember? She needs somewhere that she feels safe. She needs someone to take care of her. No one's arguing that. Just, why does it have to be your space? Why are you so quick to give it all up? She needs it, Izuku frowns. But why is her comfort more important than your own? Oboro asks quietly, watching Izuku out of the corner of his eye. Why is she more deserving of the room of Shota and Hisashi? Why won't you settle for a compromise somewhere? They're trying to find a solution where no one's put out. You're just a kid yourself, Izuku. Why are you trying to force yourself out of the equation when they're trying to rearrange it so that everyone gets what they need? Izuku pauses at that. He peers over at the box on the bed, frowning at the green cat ears poking out over the edge of the box. I don't need them like Eri does. Izuku doesn't look at the ghost, doesn't want to see the ghost's face. That's bullshit, Oboro snaps, dragging tense fingers up through cloudy blue locks. You're doing it again, man. You're such a self-sacrificer, you know that? Taking everyone else's lives into account except your own? Making it easier for everyone else but you. You're allowed to need them, even if someone else needs them too. You're allowed to want them, even if there's nothing that you need them for. You're allowed to want to keep your room, even if someone else could use it. You're allowed to have more than one bedroom so that you get the support and comfort you need, just like your classmates when they return home. You're allowed to want selfish things when it comes to your own comfort, to your guardians, your family. Izuku's heart thumps in his chest, and he's not sure why. For a full second, it feels like he can't breathe. A small part of him is hanging on to Oboro's words with a bone-white grip, while the bigger part of him is whispering that he's overreacting, that Oboro's overreacting. Right now, Eri should be the focus, not him. I know that, Izuku tells him almost numbly. He silently questions if he does really know that. But I'm still going to do whatever I can to make this easier for everyone. It's not just me I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about everyone. Eri, Shota, Hisashi, even the rest of the class. This is the best for everyone. I won't be selfish. Not about this. Oboro opens his mouth to interject, but Izuku continues before the ghost has a chance. After everything she went through, Eri needs all the help that she can get, and no one wants Shota staying somewhere else when he could be staying here. My comfort isn't worth disrupting everyone else, and like I said, I don't mind. I can't be selfish. Not now. The ghost stares for a long second before tipping backwards until he plops down on the edge of the perfectly made bed. It's a good thing that Oboro has no weight, so the blankets don't crinkle. Oboro looks defeated once again, frowning hard. There's a sadness in his eyes that Izuku doesn't really understand, but it's gone with the following sigh. You know they're going to hate this, right? That's why I'm moving my stuff while they're gone. They can't stop me if they didn't know, and there's not much they can do when I'm already downstairs. I doubt they'll even notice, Izuku informs, finally letting the conversation drop. You sound like you're running away, Oboro tells him blandly, eyes tracking Izuku's movements as the teen grabs the last couple of trinkets that he has around the room. Seeing everything he owns packed away into one box brings up unpleasant memories of leaving his childhood home, but he shoves the feeling down. He doesn't bother replying to Oboro's comment as he steps toward the bed and grabs the box easily. He sweeps his eyes over the room again, looking for everything he could have missed, but doesn't find anything. Finally, he steps toward the bedroom door, lingering for a second as he glances back at the frowning ghost. It's better for everyone, you know? If you say so, the ghost bemoans, clearly not in agreement. Still, Oboro pushes himself up off the sheets and trails after Izuku. Izuku somehow manages to open the bedroom door, even with his hands full of box. He knows Oboro could have helped. With all the practice that he's had at this point, a doorknob is no challenge for him anymore, especially not with Izuku so close. The ghost is a little spiteful right now, though, so he just stands back and watches Izuku struggle, lips pulled downward in a pout. Izuku doesn't take it to heart. Oboro has his broody moments. He makes it through the apartment with no problem and even manages to get the door open. The ghost's pout has deepened, but Izuku pays it no mind. He heads toward the stairwell, pausing at the door. This door he can't really open one-handed. The knob is finicky. He blows out a breath that flutters his bangs, and he's crouching down to set the box on the floor so that he can access the handle, twisting it just right so the door clicks open. It's as he's standing up again, with the box back in his hand, that the elevator chimes with someone's arrival. Izuku stiffens, hurrying to distribute the weight of the box and slip through the door as the elevator chimes again. Oh no. You have poor timing, Oboro comments smugly, arms crossed over his chest once again as he leans against the apartment doorway, stood dead in the middle of the closed door. Izuku shoots him a glare. He wouldn't be in this situation if Oboro had helped him, instead of pouting like a toddler having a tantrum, as he hurries to grab the box and make a quick escape. Izuku? Izuku freezes at Shota's confused drawl. He slowly turns his head just enough to spot his two guardians. Shota has his arms crossed over his chest, eyes narrowed suspiciously, while Hisashi holds a sleeping Eri. The little girl is sound asleep, little face pressed into the junction between the man's neck and shoulder, with her arms loosely clutched around his neck. She looks so small, so content. Izuku shakes himself from his thoughts. He sees the two men exchange a look, and Izuku wonders how long they'd been communicating with nothing more than quick glances at one another. How long had he been stood at the end of the hallway looking like they'd caught him doing something illegal? He sorta doesn't want to even know. He doesn't have long to dwell on the thought, as Shota's eyes easily drop down to the box in his hands before dropping even lower to where his foot is nestled between the stairwell door and the threshold in an attempt to keep the door from slipping shut. Izuku shifts awkwardly, adjusting his hold on the box like it'll do anything to conceal what he's doing. Hey, I was just heading down to my dorm, so I'll just... Hold it. Hisashi's voice cuts him off as he moves to tug the door open. He freezes, wincing at how screwed he is. Hisashi shifts, shifting Eri until she's supported by just one of his arms, his newly freed hand settling on his hip. What you got there, sunshine? Oh, it's nothing, just some stuff. If it's just some stuff, why are you sneaking around? Shota questions calmly, attention narrowed in on the teen. I'm not... Izuku starts to say, swirling around to look at his teachers. The door clicks shut behind him when he pulls his foot out of the way, and Izuku finds himself wincing once again. He offers a sheepish smile as his guardians finally catch sight of the box in his arms in entirety. The little green cat stuffed toy peeks out over the edge, just glossy glass eyes and fuzzy little ears, and the paw print pillow is too big to even be slightly hidden in the small box of belongings. He's definitely caught. Hisashi frowns as his eyes trail over the contents of the box from his position, while Shota's eyes narrow before he's lifting his prying gaze up to Izuku. Homeroom teacher and student stare at each other for a long second. Izuku can't help but fidget at the man's knowing gaze. He knows they know what he's doing. He knows they can tell that these belongings are the ones from the apartment bedroom. He's been caught. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. He hates to admit it, but he should have listened to Oboro. He'd been caught red-handed, and he doesn't know what that'll mean for him. I think we need to have a chat, Shota says lightly, gaze flicking down to the box before returning to Izuku. The man's arms drop from where they'd been crossed over his chest, and his hands tuck into his pockets. Yeah, Izuku wilts, thumb tapping over the edge of the box anxiously. All right. He knows when to accept defeat. Shota gives a nod at Izuku's agreement and steps toward the apartment door. He pushes it open and gestures Hisashi into the room first, since he's carrying something a bit heavier than a box of trinkets. The blonde shoots Izuku a look that Izuku doesn't quite know how to decipher before trailing into the apartment without jostling Eri. Shota gestures Izuku in next, standing at the door in order to make sure that Izuku doesn't just turn on his heels and leave, which he wouldn't do, probably. The boy sucks in a nervous breath as he finally steps toward his guardian, following the blonde into the room, all too aware of Shota stepping in right after him. He feels a hand settle between his shoulder blades and internally curses how his body relaxes at the touch. He can't tell if he's in trouble or not. Shota and Hisashi both slip their shoes off, and then Shota stepping to Hisashi and carefully taking Eri's shoes off her feet. He's so gentle that she doesn't stir. It's so domestic that Izuku doesn't know what to think. They'll be good guardians for her. They've been good guardians for him as well, but now someone else needs them more. Stop thinking what you're thinking. Izuku turns his head slightly toward Oboro, enough to see the ghost, but not enough to be caught looking at nothing, who's watching Izuku with a tight expression. The ghost's mouth is turned downwards in a frown, and there's a subtle sadness in his blue eyes. Kiddo. Izuku jerks his gaze back to Hisashi, who's still holding the little girl, and realizes with a start that he's still wearing his shoes. A quick glance down provides the information that he's the only one still wearing his shoes. He's quick to tow them off, nudging them toward the wall by Aries. He hefts the box back up. It's not heavy by any means, but it's also not light with all the books in it, and cautiously trails after his guardians. Izuku follows his guardians into the apartment, pausing as the two split off in different directions. Hizashi heads toward the living room, while Shota carries on into the kitchen. Izuku himself lingers. Peering into the apartment, he watches the blonde lower Eri down onto the couch, the little girl still not stirring despite the transfer. The man then tugs the throw blanket that's usually on the back of the couch down over the child. Fish wastes no time in trotting from the love seat to settle on the blanket beside the girl. He'd taken a bit of a liking to the child even if Eri was still unsure about the cats. Izuku can't imagine growing up and not seeing dogs and cats in day-to-day life. Introducing Eri to the entire concept of pets, Nemo, fish, and blanket specifically, had been heartbreaking for everyone involved. When Eri is fully settled on the couch, Hizashi stands to his full height. The man looks down at the child for a second to make sure that she's secure before lifting his attention to Izuku, frowning when he notices him shifting awkwardly. "Come on, sunshine," Hizashi offers with a light smile. "Let's chat in the kitchen so we don't bother Eri. She watched a little too much TV down in the teachers' dorms and got a bit overwhelmed." Izuku gives a wordless nod, finally kicking his body into action and trailing after his guardian. Shota stands at the counter. When they make it into the kitchen, he's got 2 mugs on the counter behind him, and the kettle is seconds away from boiling. The man sips at a mug of fresh coffee, eyes shut as he leans back against the counter. He looks tired. Izuku feels guilty. He's not sure why. Shota's eyes sliver open when he hears their footsteps, but he's turning toward the kettle when it bubbles up to a boil. Izuku watches as the man pours the water into the mugs easily. He's seeing Hizashi move to settle at the kitchen table out of the corner of his eye. "Have a seat, kid," Shota says without looking back at Izuku. The teen can't help but startle at being addressed. It's then that he notices he'd been clutching the box of belongings to his chest like some sort of security blanket. He loosens his grip as he carefully inches into the room. He isn't sure why he's so nervous. He knows this is just a conversation. It's always just a conversation. He's not been yelled at yet. Not in home life, at least, because everyone knows he's been yelled at a lot during class, and he doesn't think what he'd been caught doing was overly bad. Is he wrong? Obro had been trying to warn him, but had it really been an actual problem? Had he really upset them? He sets the box down by his chair before sitting down stiffly. He drags his nails over his thighs lightly, anxiously, as he waits. It's not much time later that a tea is being set in front of him. Shota offers a tiny smile as he retracts his hand, before the man steps away as he sets a hand on Izuku's head, ruffling his fingers gently through green curls. Izuku knows he leans into the touch, but it doesn't stop the nerves that are churning in his stomach. Izuku wraps his hands around the mug, slotting 3 of his fingers through the handle as he cups shaking fingers around the hot ceramic. He lifts the mug to his lips, taking a tiny hesitant sip to gauge the temperature of the tea. Not too hot, but hot enough that he softly blows out a cooling breath before actually taking a sip. It's perfect. Steeped perfectly to his liking, sweetened just right. It's even the mug that he tends to always choose when given the option. It's not his, but it's definitely his favorite. A good size, and lightweight, durable, good for a toddler-like ghost who isn't always as great with his hands as he thinks he is, and it's hit the floor more times than Izuku can count. That guilty feeling is back, squeezing around his heart uncomfortably as he stares down into the green tea. He's not used to people knowing how he likes his tea. He's the one to know other people's preferences, not usually the other way around. People don't tend to notice little things like that, and certainly not about him. Izuku frowns at the thought, watching the little ripples in his tea from his faint thumbing at the side of the mug. He knows he hadn't been doing anything bad, not really. All he'd been doing was taking his stuff downstairs, right? There are worse things he could have been caught doing. He was just moving a box, but he was technically acting against their wishes, right? "You know, problem child." Izuku jerks his attention up from his steaming tea, blinking thoughtlessly when he notices Shota has now settled at the table too. They're both watching him, grasping their own warm drinks between their palms. Izuku's momentarily brought back to that first night with his guardians when Shota had first found out that he was homeless. Shota faintly quirks his head to the side when he sees he has Izuku's attention. Typically, when people decide to move out, they give a heads up to their guardians. "What?" Izuku blinks owlishly. "But I wasn't—" "The moving box at your feet says otherwise," the underground hero points out, not unkindly. "I wasn't," Izuku insists, shifting enough that his foot bumps against the box. "I was just, well, I mean, okay, I was bringing some stuff downstairs, I guess, but I'm not moving out, just clearing out the room a little. It's only one room to another, right?" His guardians share a look, and Izuku bites back a wince. That, is pretty much the definition of moving out, kiddo. Any particular reason you were just clearing stuff out of your room? Something wrong with the room? No, no, the room is perfect. Nothing's wrong. With the room, I mean. It's good. As always, I just thought... Izuku shakes his head. Well, I thought that it would be, best? Best, Shota repeats, mouth curling faintly into a frown. Izuku bobs his head in a nod, thumbing along the handle of his mug, just so that he has something to do with his hands. He looks down at the table, scared to actually look at either of his guardians. He doesn't want to see hurt or anger. Doesn't think he'd be able to handle it. Okay, Hisashi hums softly when Izuku doesn't elaborate. Well, want to take us through your thoughts, then? We want to understand, but we don't. Not yet. How is moving your stuff from one room to the other best? Izuku hesitates for a second, gaze flicking up to first Hisashi and then to Shota before dropping back down to his tea. I just thought you guys might feel better about letting Eri have the spare room if there wasn't anything of mine left in there. Free up some room. It's empty, just a spare room with nothing in it, nothing that makes it mine, you know? I can just take the stuff downstairs and everything works out, right? It's not a spare room, though, Shota tells him gently, endlessly patient. A lack of your personal belongings doesn't make the room a spare. That won't change the fact that that second bedroom in this apartment is yours. It's yours with or without your things in there. We have that bedroom for you. Nezu added the secondary room to the layout with you in mind. I'm sorry, kid, but we're going to stand firm on this one. We're not letting Eri take your room. Izuku slumps in his chair, staring at his mug. Defeat swirls in his stomach with the uncertainty and guilt already churning. It's not a very nice mixture or feeling. He knows they've had this conversation before. They had this conversation while Eri was still in the hospital, and they'd insisted that they weren't going to give Eri the room. He hadn't thought they'd be this serious about it, not when they're sleeping on futons in the living room when there's a perfectly good bed just down the hall. She can't keep sleeping on the floor, Izuku says without looking up. Don't you think she needs a space of her own? Somewhere that she can have toys and privacy and sleep on a bed? We can't all keep sleeping in the living room, and soon I'll need to return to my dorm anyways. Of course she needs a space of her own. Hisashi nods firmly. But that space she needs isn't going to be your space. We're not going to take something away from you and give it to someone else. We understand that you think the room is superficial, but it's yours. We spend a lot of time here, and you deserve to have your own space in our home, in your home. I have a dorm downstairs, Izuku reminds Riley. I don't need 2 bedrooms on campus. But it's just that, Izuku, a dorm, Shota replies. All of the students have a dorm, but they also have a place to sleep at home, a space away from school. Just because you kids sleep here during the school week doesn't mean that they lose their space, their place at home. Bakugo and Hitoshi still have bedrooms to return to, and I'm sure that none of your peers' home sleeping arrangements have changed much between dorm life and going home for the weekends or holidays. It's exactly the same for you. You need a place that isn't a school dorm, your own space outside of school. The bedroom in this apartment is that for you, and we won't be giving that to someone else. Well, Hisashi bites his lip, offering a lopsided grin. As close to outside of school as we can get when we're stuck on campus as live-in teachers. But what about Eri? Izuku finally looks up at them. I thought we told you we'd figure it out. Shota leans back in his chair with a frown. You're a kid, Izuku. This isn't your problem to be solving. There's a lot more to this than just finding Eri a bed and a bedroom. This isn't something that you can sort out overnight. But, Hisashi continues softly, leaning back in his seat so that he can faintly gaze into the living room where they know Eri is still sleeping. We've been working on it. Sleeping in the living room is temporary. For now, she feels comfortable with the 2 of you sleeping out there with her. We're looking into what's best for Eri right now, and for you too. Me? Izuku bristles. This isn't about me. It is. Shota disagrees, sipping at his tea. Well, not just you, problem child. All of us. This isn't a decision that we can just take lightly, not but it involves all of us. Izuku isn't sure he likes that answer, brow furrowing as he tightens his grip on the mug in his hands. What sort of decision is it, then? Shota and Hisashi exchange another glance. A decision about Eri's placement. That's here, isn't it? Izuku blinks and then he blinks a second time as the words sink in. Shota has guardianship over her, doesn't he? Her placement's here with you guys. She needs that. I think she'll be happy up here with you guys. It's not that simple, kiddo. Izashi shakes his head with a sad smile. Sho does have guardianship right now, but that was more or less a panic placement by social services and the police. She has a powerful quirk that she can't control, and Eraserhead just so happened to be the person that was involved as a hero with a quirk that can nullify hers. It was the safest option on such short notice. Izuku opens his mouth to respond. He knows all this. He'd been at the hospital too when Shota had been granted guardianship over Eri. It made the most sense, so he wasn't sure why Hisashi was explaining it now. Before Izuku can get a word in, though, Shota beats him to the punch. As the man speaks, he leans back against the chair and rakes his fingers through his hair. But safest doesn't always mean best. But it's safest, Izuku disagrees. And she's happy here, right? You guys are really good guardians. I mean, you've helped me a lot, and you take good care of me. I don't know where I'd be now if I'd never been placed with you, so I know this will work out. I know that Ariel loved living here with you guys. She just needs people like you in her life. You're the cutest, Sunshine, Izashi coos, reaching over the table to ruffle Izuku's hair. I'm so glad you're still happy with us, but I'm not sure we can be what Eri needs. What? Izuku asks quietly, gaze flickering between his two guardians. What does that mean? It means that we don't think that we're ready for a second kid, Izashi tells him calmly. Izuku pauses, brain whirring as it tries to catch up. There's a big difference between fostering a little kid and a teenager, kiddo. There is? He asks dumbly, surprise settling in his gaze. The question hangs in the lapse of silence for a second before he realizes just how dumb it does sound as his guardians look between one another as if trying to figure out how to answer such a question. Of course there's a difference between a little girl and a teenager, Izuku. Nice one. Eloquent as always. He tries to swallow down the festering embarrassment of that question as he elaborates. I mean, I know that we're different, obviously. She's 6, I'm 16. That's 10 years of a difference. She obviously needs more from you guys, like comfort and support and stuff, but I don't understand why you can't be that for her. You've done that for me. You still do that for me. Yes and no, Shota tells him easily, sipping thoughtfully at his coffee before returning his attention to Izuku. I wouldn't exactly say that little kids need more. They just need different. All children are different. You're different to the handful of other foster kids that we took in briefly before you, and Eri would need something entirely different from you as well. You all needed something different from us, depending on your situation. We've had kids stay just a couple of nights while things got sorted out at home, and temporary placements while something more permanent was figured out. You need something more permanent, and we were the most suitable placement. Eri needs permanent too, but it's not exactly the same. He's right, but there is a truth in the fact that little kids generally do need a different sort of care, Izashi tacks on. You're right that Eri will need a place where she's safe and supported, where she feels comfortable and has her own space to grow and work her way through the trauma of what happened to her, but she also needs more involved parents as well, a caretaker around the clock. She's very young, kiddo. She needs someone to be a constant part of her life. You guys can't? Izuku asks quietly. It's an honest question. He's trying to understand. He's getting answers now, a discussion. They're laying everything out for him, and he's slowly piecing together the opposite side's argument. We can't, Shota sighs, rubbing at his eyes. We work 5 jobs between us, and I'm already raising a class of hellions that I'm quite sure will give me a heart attack at some point before you lot graduate. And there's you to take into account as well. Me? Izuku asks a second time. He's not sure why they keep thinking of him. Shouldn't everyone be focused on Eri? She needs it more, doesn't she? Still, he thinks if he questions any further, they'll have those sad looks again, which he definitely doesn't want to see. It always makes him feel sad, too. He doesn't want to disappoint them, and he can feel the ghost's eyes glaring a hole through the back of his head where he's sitting at the kitchen wall, another warning to keep his thoughts to himself. You, Hisashi nods seriously. We'll always take you into account first, Sunshine. Just because there was even a thought of Eri staying here more permanently doesn't change your place here to us. You came here first, and a new placement won't change that. You're our kid, you dig? Right. Shota agrees, angling his head toward Hisashi with a tiny nod before looking back at the teenager. Truthfully, kid, we don't even know if we're giving you what you'd need between our jobs. The only reason that we can make this work is because you're a teenager. You have friends, and you want to spend time with them, and you're self-efficient now in a way that a child should never have to be. You can take care of yourself if we're home late, or we're busy with work. A little girl, especially a little girl like Eri, with very limited experience, can't do the same. You are! Izuku jerks his attention up, zeroing in on the statement that's just not true. You're good. Really good. Good guardians. Great guardians, even. I really am happy to be here with you guys. And I'm so thankful you've kept me around. Even though you're busy, I never thought differently either. I think that you're giving me just what I need. Izuku blows out a nervous breath, cutting himself off and wilting down in his seat as he does so. His tea has gone cold now, and he still wraps his hands around the mug and takes another sip. He taps his fingers against the ceramic, bowing his head thoughtfully. I also sort of think you're underestimating yourselves, Izuku adds quietly, not looking up at either of them. He doesn't know if he should be saying this, doesn't dare look up to see their faces. You've helped me a lot. I've grown a lot as a person and as a hero, and I know that you could do the same for Eri. You've always been looking out for me, even before my mom, and when you've been amazing guardians, something that I never really had, not in the capacity that I think maybe I should have. Hisashi gives an almost sad-sounding hum. You never should have grown up the way you did. The man lets out a heavy sigh, rubbing at his forehead. He looks troubled by the thought. It was wrong and neglectful. You deserved better, listener. We'd love to take Eri in. She's a lovely little girl, but if we have any doubts about taking her on, we shouldn't risk it. Even unintentional neglect will cause damage, and we'd never want to hurt her by forcing this to happen when there are other alternatives out there that'll be healthier for all involved. That makes sense. Izuku hadn't really thought of it like that. He hates to think about it, but he wonders how different his life would be if someone reported his mother being gone more than she was home when he was little. If neighbors had noticed a sad, neglected, quirkless kid and cared enough to involve social services. How different would he be if he'd grown up in a stable environment where he was wanted? He feels tears welling in the corner of his eyes as he thinks of how little Izuku would be waiting up on the couch for Mom to come home, cooking for himself and taking care of his own injuries after Kachan and classmates got too rough, and doing all the chores so his mom never came home to a mess, getting himself to and from school and only seeing his mother in the form of shadows sneaking around in the early morning or late night. That's no way for a kid to be raised. And it's definitely no way for Eri to be raised. She'd been through enough already for that to become her day-to-day life, exchanging one toxic environment for another in a different form. Sunshine. Hisashi's voice comes out so soft, and then there's a hand on Izuku's, a gentle thumb brushing along his knuckles. You okay? Yeah. Izuku gives a watery laugh as he brings his other hand up to palm the tears away. He sniffles out another laugh, angling his head down to rub his cheek against his shoulder. The friction of his shift on his cheek is dragging him back to the present. He feels a chilling presence behind him and takes comfort in the fact that his friend is close and offering his own comfort. He knows if Oboro could, he'd have already set a grounding hand on Izuku's shoulder. You're right. The teen finally offers a shaky smile, his eyes glistening with tears. That's just not any way for a little kid to be raised. I don't think you guys could ever be like my mom, and I don't think that you'd ever mean it like she did, but if you have even a doubt that there's a chance that you don't think that you can make her your whole world, maybe a different placement is a good idea. Between everything, Shota hesitates, watching Izuku with a thoughtful expression. It just isn't logical for us to take in another kid right now. I need to be able to focus on the kids I already have. You, your classmates, Hitoshi. I can't be giving you all what you need when there's a little girl relying on me too. No one should be put on the back burner in this situation. Izuku gives a nod, finally coming to terms with the fact that Eri staying with them, as much as he'd love for the little girl to stay, might not be the best-case scenario for any of them. We know you love that little girl, Sunshine. Hisashi smiles fondly, expression soft and open. And you'd make an amazing older brother, but the best place for Eri is somewhere that she'll have all the attention she needs. Between school, heroics, and my radio show, I don't think that any of us would be able to be the constant that she needs in her life. Izuku nods once again to show he understands. He gets it. There's no point in Shota and Hisashi taking on a second foster kid if they don't think that they're the right placement. Izuku doesn't entirely see it from the same angle. He knows they're amazing parents, but if they're vetoing it for Eri's sake, he believes it's the right option. So, if she's not staying here, Izuku hazards, fiddling with the handle of his mug, where will Eri be going? His guardians exchange a knowing look, and Izuku feels a sense of dread settle in his stomach. He hadn't prepared himself for this. He sucks in a nervous breath, not wanting to ask his next question, but knowing he needs to. Still, the words come out fearful and choked. Will we get to see her still? Oh, sweetheart. Hizashi coos, finally standing up and rounding the table to wrap Izuku in a hug. Izuku melts into the embrace, letting his head fall back against Hizashi's chest to look over at the man that was leaning over him. We'd never take her away from you. Of course, you'll still get to see her still. She needs you and Tokuda as much as the two of you need her. As sad as it is to think about, we know that she has an emotional attachment to the both of you. You two were the first to find her, and the ones to bring her home in the end. It would do more damage to take her away from that entirely, though we don't want her becoming too reliant on either of you either. A situation like this is delicate. We'll still see her. Izuku can't help the relief in his tone. He's thankful. He thinks that maybe he's sort of emotionally attached to her a bit as well. The fight against Chisaki had been traumatic, especially when it had to come down to Eri and Izuku using one another's power to fight the villain. Will she be going far? Is there someone you have in mind to take her? I know that she's with us right now because of her quirk, so I doubt that she can go into regular foster care. She can't, Shota agrees, watching Hizashi fondly as the man finally pulls away from where he'd been wrapped around Izuku like a koala. The blonde kisses the top of the boy's head before finally heading back to his own seat. Izuku can tell his cheeks flush at the domesticity of it as Shota grins softly. The man's smile lingers for a second before the seriousness is back. Eri's situation's a bit different from most Child Protective Service cases. The Yakuza is dangerous, even if Chisaki's locked up in Tartarus. Right now, as you know, she's in a specialized hero witness protection program. That means that she's considered a high-priority victim. She has a valuable quirk that could potentially be dangerous, so she can't be placed just anywhere, and Chisaki did manage to make quirk erasing bullets from her quirk. What does that mean, though? Izuku asks, head cocking to the side in curiosity. He gets it, the gist of it. Eri needs to be placed somewhere that has the means to keep her safe from an attack, not to mention a place that could also keep her and everyone else safe from a quirk accident should she have another. Ideally, Hizashi continues, she'd be placed with a hero, or sometimes an exception foster parent if the security and safety measures are suited for the child in question. I wouldn't say a lot of heroes have fostering license, but quite a few do. We've got ours, and we started teaching, just in case, but I probably would have either way. Same here, Shota adds. A lot of underground heroes tend to have a fostering license. Right. Hizashi nods in agreement. The blonde glances thoughtfully into the living room again, but by the silence and the confirmation from the ghost who checks in on her, she's still asleep. Still, Eri can't be placed with just anyone. Her quirk is dangerous, if she can't control it, so there needs to be someone who can stop it if she did have an accident. Izuku mentally runs through the list of heroes who have an Eraser-type quirk, but as far as he knows, Eraserhead's the only one with an ideal quirk. He frowns to himself. There aren't any heroes who have a quirk like Eraser. Izuku's nose scrunches at the thought. Where will she go, then? You're thinking too narrowly, Shota tells him, the corners of his mouth ticking upwards, almost proudly. The quirk doesn't need to be an Eraser quirk. It needs to be able to nullify Eri's own in some way or another. Broaden your horizon. It's not the most straightforward answer, but it's logical. He runs through the heroes he knows once again, but it comes up short a second time. Why does it feel like he's trying to solve some riddle? Izuku narrows his eyes, lips puckering as he looks between his guardians suspiciously. Do you guys actually have someone in mind to take Eri? Or am I just supposed to be giving you ideas on candidates? Hizashi lets out a bark of laughter, grinning wildly at the accusation as Shota snorts out his own quieter laugh. The man flaps a dismissive hand. We do, problem child, Shota tells him fondly. And we're in the process of transferring guardianship now. Already? Izuku blinks in surprise. Where's she going? Who has a quirk that can nullify her quirk? It's still up in the air. We need a lot of different permissions from a lot of different people to transfer the guardianship over, especially when it comes to a high-priority victim, Hizashi tells the teenager. But Namuri's the one who's interested in becoming Eri's foster mother. Izuku hears a muttered, "Holy shit, no way," behind him, but makes no move to turn and look at the ghost. He's not sure what he thinks about the surprise in the ghost's tone. Namuri? Izuku tastes the familiar-sounding name before it clicks into place. Midnight, Sensei. That's the one, Shota snorts out. Not exactly your first guess, huh? Izuku shakes his head softly. Midnight hadn't been in his thoughts at all. It's nothing against her, just some of the comments she makes and the sensual overall attitude aren't exactly qualities he'd think would be best in raising a little girl. She has a tendency to not be entirely chaste, either in school or while she's out doing hero work. She really is the R-rated hero. Then again, after meeting Namuri out of costume, she had been different. There was still the sultry tease that seemed to be a part of her personality, but it was much more subdued, casual. She'd been very kind, and if she'd be nice to him, and she doesn't doubt that she'll be nice to a sweet little girl like Eri. It's all a persona, Izuku, Shota tells him as if reading his mind. Nemuri's always been a motherly type. She used to mother hen us all the time in school. She helped us more than some of our teachers did, and always found the time to meet up with us despite her busy, opposite to our schedule. Even after we graduated, she still made it her personal mission to take care of us when she could. Who do you think got us all to teaching jobs? She really has always been looking out for us. Hisashi agrees with a light smile. He leans back in his chair and looks up toward the ceiling, reminiscent-like. After we lost our best friend, she was one of the people who kicked our asses back into action, and she's always made an effort to give us what we need instead of what we wanted. That's hard to balance, but she always managed. I've always looked up to her. She's always been a good senpai to us. Senpai, Shota snorts, rolling his eyes fondly. She's always liked to point out that 1-year age gap like it was making any difference whatsoever. It's almost 2 years for you, babe. You were always her favorite youngest kiddo, am I right? Hisashi snickers, and Izuku doesn't need to look to know that Shota had kicked his husband's shin under the table at the teasing, but Hisashi's yelp makes him crack a smile. Anyways, Shota clears his throat, pointedly looking at a pouting Hisashi. The point is, Midnight's just a persona, just like Present Mike. Nemuri's sarcastic and a pain in my ass, but she's also incredibly loyal and nurturing. There isn't another hero out there I'd feel more comfortable handing custody of that little girl over to. They're right. Oboro speaks behind Izuku. He still can't look back at the ghost, but he does shift in a way that lets the ghost know he's being heard. She's a lot more than a seductive heartthrob. I didn't know her as well as these two back then, but she was always super kind even whenever I was being a blundering, lovesick puppy towards her. She put up with me, and I've watched her take care of those idiots for years. Ari'll be in good hands. She'll be good for the kid. She really wants her? Izuku asks uncertainly. She does. She wants to help Eri. Shota replies softly. Just like we do. The only difference is she has more time to do it. Midnight's only obligation right now is teaching, so Eri will have a guardian who has the time to be with her. Nemuri also has room in her dorm apartment. All the teacher apartments got a second bedroom, so she has the space for it as well. Eri will have her own room, and a bed, just like you want for her. And no one needs to move out for it. Shota pauses, eyes scanning Izuku's face, lips quirking up faintly as the teen flushes in embarrassment and toes awkwardly at the box at his feet like it's evidence of a crime. The underground hero lets out a humorous exhale as he continues. Everyone will be happy, and no one has to give anything up, and she's still close enough that if Nemuri's quirk doesn't work in the desired way against Eri's own, then I can get there relatively fast and use erasure. Oh, right, Izuku hums. Everything finally clicks into place. Her quirk, somnambulist. I forgot about that. It's an aesthetic, more or less. I'm not quite sure eraser-type quirk, but it could put Eri to sleep if she loses control, right? That's actually a really good idea. Induced sleep is probably less traumatic than having her quirk stripped away by erasure. You're such a quirk nerd, Oboro snorts out fondly. Right you are, Hisashi nods. And the little listener will still be super close, only a couple of minutes walk away. We'll still be able to see her all the time. Nem's practically family, so Eri is too. You'll get to be the greatest Sukuni you can be. Don't worry, your little head, all right, sunshine? Everything will fall into place when we're not forcing it to happen. Izuku doesn't say anything for a second. He looks between his guardians before turning in his chair to peek into the living room. The little girl's still sleeping from what he can see. So, Shota's voice jolts Izuku from his thoughts. He swirls back to look at his guardians, staring wide-eyed. Do you think that this arrangement's satisfactory? Yeah, Izuku gives a nod, smiling slightly as he does so. I know you guys would make good guardians for Eri because you're good guardians for me too, but if it's not you guys taking her in, then I think Nemuri-sama is a good alternative, a good compromise. Good. Shota bows his head in a nod, looking pleased. Now, please tell me you'll stop trying to move out. We like having you around, problem child. We like knowing that you have a room up here with us. Yeah, Izuku gives a sheepish laugh, rubbing at the back of his neck as he pushes away from the table just enough to look down at the box under it. I will. I'm sorry. No, don't apologize. Hisashi waves a dismissive hand, offering a soft grin. It's really sweet that you were so worried about Eri-chan, but next time, maybe just give us a chance to figure stuff out before taking matters into your own hands and trying to move out without anyone noticing, yeah? Probably would have cried if I looked in your room and I saw it empty, you dig? He definitely would have. Shota agrees dryly. He ignores Hisashi's squawk of betrayal, attention lulling back onto Izuku. You've got to put a little bit of trust into us, kiddo. We're trying to do what's best for everyone, you included. Just maybe talk to us next time you're thinking about moving. I wasn't really moving out, Izuku mumbles in embarrassment. But I will. Thank you. Hisashi snickers at Izuku's embarrassed pout. The man lifts his mug to his lips, draining the last of his tea before gathering everyone's empty mugs. Now, how's about you take your stuff back to your room and unpack? I'm going to get started on dinner, and Shota, you should get a jump start on that Guardian transfer paperwork. You know Nem's going to be on your ass about it now. Yeah, the tired man sighs. Probably best to start on that while Eri's sleeping. Izuku looks between his guardians as they stand to go about their business. Izuku lingers for a second before smiling to himself and following suit. He grabs the box and silently makes his way to his room. He feels someone follow him into the room. Don't say it, Izuku mutters under his breath as he closes the door behind himself. He turns to the bed, unsurprised to see the ghost sitting cross-legged on the bottom corner of the bed, a shit-eating grin on his face. I don't know what you're talking about, Izu, Obro defends, lifting his hands in surrender. Izuku nods to himself, cocking a suspicious eyebrow at the grinning ghost, before finally turning to set the box on the desk. He pulls out the green stuffed cat first, thumbing over the glass eyes and smiling down at it. He grabs the paw print pillow, turning to the head of the bed where he settles each down on the comforter. Something about putting them back on the bed feels right. Hey, Izuku. I told you so. It's exactly 4 days after the discussion in the kitchen that Nemuri is awarded custody of Eri. Izuku doesn't know a lot about the legal stuff that happens. He knows that he and Eri spend a lot of time upstairs in the apartment together and down in the dorms while his guardians and Nemuri are meeting with Principal Nezu and social services and even the police department to get everything in order. He's sad that he's not getting a little sister, that he can't be there for the little girl constantly, but he's glad Nemuri is the one taking her in. And he's glad he's not losing the little girl entirely. 5 minutes away is better than across Japan. He still gets to be a part of her life. When everyone wasn't busy with important meetings, they found themselves slowly introducing Eri to Nemuri. She seems to like the pro, and there's no doubt that Nemuri doesn't already adore the little girl. She gets down on Eri's level, and they have conversations. Eri starts to warm up to Nemuri, since she's pretty much a constant in the afternoons and evenings. The woman joins them for dinner and sometimes for lunch if they can manage. They take the time to play child-friendly games just to get Eri comfortable. A lot of it's teaching Eri how to be a kid, which is heartbreaking in its own way, but Izuku's just glad that she's getting to be a kid after everything. She still hadn't completely warmed up to Shota and Hisashi, not like she had Izuku and Tokita, but she's more comfortable with them than she is with Nemuri. It makes sense considering Nemuri is a new face, where she'd seen Shota during the raid, and Hisashi in the hospital for that week that she'd been admitted. Eri still stays close to Izuku, but he hopes as Eri lives with the pro that she'll come around to the idea of having a guardian just like Izuku had. He wants this to go swiftly. He wants her to feel safe. He hopes that Nemuri can be what Eri needs, just like Shota and Hisashi had been for Izuku. The day the pro gets custody is the day that Eri moves into her new home. Nemuri's excited when they arrive with the little girl. Nemuri doesn't even bat an eyelash at the less than excited reaction from the child, simply gets down on her knees beside Izuku and Eri. The little girl has a bone-white grip on Izuku's own hand, shyly pressing against his side, like Nemuri is suddenly a stranger instead of a nice lady who came bearing small gifts and sweets whenever she visited. Nemuri doesn't seem offended in the least, which Izuku guiltily realizes that he'd been anticipating. He doesn't know why this is so hard. He knows she'll be safe and happy here, but he's still anxious. Maybe it's Eri's own hesitance that has him on high alert. Eri-chan, Nemuri cooed, smiling widely. You got to see the new room that we put together for you. You remember all the teachers, right? You met most of them, huh? Well, everyone's worked so hard to make sure that your room is so special for you, just for you. Isn't that exciting? Lemillion even helped. He picked out some of your new toys for you. Eri looks interested, but instead of taking the bait, she pushes even closer to Izuku, looking up at him with wide, nervous eyes. Izuku offers her a smile, squeezing lightly at the small hand in his own. I have an idea, Nemuri continues, smile never waning. Why doesn't Izuku-ni take you down the hall and he shows you? We're just going to chat in the kitchen, all right? You come find us when you're finished looking around, and then we can have some of the cookies that you made with Izuku-ni's friends down in the dorms, okay? Okay, Eri agrees softly, studying Nemuri before looking up hopefully at Izuku. Can we? Of course, he assures her, bending down so that he's closer to her height as well. I really want to see your room, too, You saw mine, remember? I'm sure your new room will be so much cooler. Yeah, Hisashi agrees from the doorway, watching the interactions with a soft expression. Your room is so cool, Eri-chan. You little listeners should totally look around and check it out. We'll be right in the kitchen if you need us. Shota nods but doesn't add anything. The more hyping they do, the more excited Eri looks. The tense grip on his hand loosens some, but she doesn't pull away. You want me to show you, Eri-chan? The little girl nods, eyes bright with curiosity. He pulls away just enough that she's no longer shoved against Izuku's side, looking up with an awestruck expression as she waits for Izuku to lead her to the room. Just keep an eye out for sushi, Namuri reminds as they finally start toward the hallway. Shota and Hisashi are already making their way toward the kitchen as Namuri lingers in the kitchen doorway as she continues. That little sweetheart has been obsessed with Eri-chan's new room. We will, Izuku assures, with a smile thrown back over his shoulder at the woman. That's all the assurance that Namuri seems to need as she returns the smile and finally joins Izuku's guardians. Sushi? Eri blinks, glancing back at where Namuri had just been before looking up at Izuku for an answer. That's the kitty who lives here, Izuku explains. He's very old and a bit shy, so you might not see him a lot. You've got to be gentle if you do, all right? Like blanket and fish? Eri connects the dots. Izuku nods fondly, and he leads her down the hall. He bites back a smile at the fact that Eri doesn't even know that Nemo exists, since the cat had decided right off the bat that she hated children, and she kept herself hidden in the bedrooms whenever Eri was awake. That's right. We have to be gentle with sushi like Shota taught us to be with fish. You could hurt them if you're too rough, or they could hurt you by trying to tell you to stop, okay? Okay. Eri nods seriously, absorbing the words like a little sponge. It isn't hard finding Eri's new room. He hasn't seen it yet. Hadn't even been to Namuri's apartment above the 2 gen ed class once, but there's only 3 doors down the hall, and one of them has a pink glittery kanji for the name Eri hanging on it. He makes an educated decision to push that door open. They stand in the doorway for a second, both just staring into the room. It's nice. The bed has a character-themed bedspread for the show that Izuku had showed her, and there's a dresser and a toy box, a small table with 4 little chairs pushed under it, and a tea set placed delicately on top of the tabletop. There's a bunch of toys, coloring books and crayons. He spots a sea of stuffed animals, no doubt being the one item that most people had gotten the girl as a welcome home gift. Izuku wonders how many of those new toys they'll need to show her how to use. Zuku-ni? Izuku turns toward the little girl. Is this really for me? Izuku feels his heart melt in his chest as he moves to kneel beside the bed where Eri's standing. He hadn't noticed her move from his side, but he silently takes that as a good sign. She looks around, her expression shy and perplexed all the same. Her eyes trail over the room, taking everything in. It sure is, Izuku tells her softly, patting the bed and helping her up on it. Nemi, Shota, and Hisashi decorated for you, remember? And the rest of the teachers, even the million and some of the other students got you all of these new toys. This is all for you. This is your room. The nickname that Midnight had asked to be referred by feels awkward in Izuku's mouth. It feels far too personal for his sensei and a pro hero, but he understands that she wouldn't want the little girl calling her sensei all the time. Eri's young enough that whatever name she knows you by is probably the name that'll stick for a while. He knows Shota and Hisashi had gotten tired of being called sensei at home, too. Izuku feels a light smile lift on his lips as he thinks back to his own awkwardness back then. Izuku watches fondly as the little girl checks the room out. She'd slipped off the bed and was now just toddling around the room, taking everything in. He can see the questions in her gaze as she inspects her new toys, but she'd probably just be too overwhelmed to ask anything. Eri-chan, Izuku calls, waiting for the child to look back at him before he smiles fondly and continues. Have you ever had a tea party? Her nose scrunches in confusion, and she shakes her head. This? The boy shuffles on his knees to the small table. He picks up the little teapot by the handle, turning toward her and continuing. Is a tea set. It's really fun. We could have a pretend tea, and you invite guests. I'm sure that some of your new toys would love to come to a tea party. They would? Eri looks back at the pile of stuffed toys, brow furrowed up once again. Who? Pick any of them, Izuku insists gently. Fine, too, so everyone can have a seat. Okay. Eri's eyes are wide with excitement. She darts over to the mountain of stuffed toys, digging through so that she can select the one she likes. How's it going in here? Izuku turns at the sound of Oborou's voice. Nem is stressed out, so I hope that you're making some progress with Eri. It might be a rough next couple of days if Eri doesn't settle. Oborou's eyes flick to where Eri's comparing toys now. Looks like you're having some luck. Izuku offers a silent nod as the ghost steps further into the room, looking around with a nod of approval. Izuku knows the ghost had been coming and going with his guardians every so often, and he took every chance he could to interact with Sushi. Man, this room really came together. She really looks like she likes it. I'm glad. Kid deserves it. Obero's eyes widen, as does his smile as he bounds closer. Ooh, are you having a tea party? I want to come. Izuku snorts a laugh to himself as the ghost seats himself in one of the tiny chairs, looking entirely too proud of himself. Izuku isn't sure that he's ever seen the ghost so excited for a tea party. A pretend tea party. Don't give me that look. The ghost waggles a finger in Izuku's direction. The green-haired teen is hunched over on the small table, his knees almost in his chest as he squeezes in. His pretzel-bent body is supported just by his elbow on a tiny table, hand cupping his chin. The ghost doesn't have the same problem. Knees phase through the table, the teapot, and the teacup in front of him. This is practically ghost tea. Pretend is about the peak of my palate now. Okay, well, you're in someone else's spot, Izuku tells the ghost under his breath. Oboro leans back in the chair defiantly, crossing his arms over his chest. I picked two, Eri chirps as she joins Izuku at the table. Hugged to her chest is a plush unicorn toy and a midnight doll. Izuku blinks at the official pro merch before hiding a smile behind his hand. Maybe Namuri had been making more progress than they thought. Eri settles at Izuku's side, scanning the table before frowning. She rounds Izuku and settles both the unicorn and the midnight doll into the same chair before returning to Izuku's side and taking her own seat. Oboro's chair is empty. Well, besides Oboro. Izuku opens his mouth to question the decision to sit two guests on the same seat when there's a fourth available, but decides better of it. Eri's playing. Who is he to question her methods? What now, Zuku-ni? Well, did you make pretend tea? Eri blinks slowly before pulling the pot toward herself. She takes the lid off and looks inside. Yes? Okay. Izuku bites back a snicker. Then you should pour it out for all your guests. Eri's mouth forms an O shape as she carefully stands, shifting the pot to support it in her two hands. Her tongue pokes out in concentration as she carefully pours herself a cup of pretend tea. The confusion in her expression is funny, but she also looks like she's enjoying herself as she moves to Izuku's cup to repeat the process. Is it fun? Izuku asks her. It sure is. Oboro grins cheekily. Eri sure knows how to throw a killer tea party. Eri nods enthusiastically as the ghost teases, leaning over the table to pour the unicorn and Midnight their cup. She's treating the small plastic pot as if it was a glass pot that she'd probably seen on the table at their apartment. You know, I'm sure Nemi would love to have a tea party with you later. Izuku edges carefully, reading the little girl's expression before continuing. Then you could have Midnight-san and Nemi both at your tea party. They're both pretty cool heroes, just like Eraserhead, Present Mike, and Lemillion. And Deku? Really? Eri asks, looking toward the ajar door. She would? I know she'd love to. Izuku nods, offering Eri a comforting smile. You know, I was a little scared at first when I started staying with Shota and Hisashi, but they just wanted to help me, just like Nomuri wants to help you. I promise, you'll have a lot of fun here with Nemi. Eri fiddles with the teapot in her hands, lifting nervous eyes to Izuku. You're like me? Just like you, Izuku assures, even though their situations are worlds apart. I know it's scary, but you're safe here. Nemi will protect you, and she can even help you if your quirk is being bad again. Remember, you just go to sleep nice and easy. Eri nods slowly, red eyes staring intently down at the little teapot. Okay. Do you promise? I promise. Izuku holds up his pinky fingers. That's something Ashido had taught the little girl, and like most children, Eri had run with it. Izuku's fairly sure that most of his class had a withstanding pinky promise with this little girl for something or another, even Kachan. Eri wastes no time in hooking her own tiny pinky around his. Now, should we finish up our tea party and go find the adults? Eri nods again, a tiny smile tilting onto her lips as she finally leans over to fill the last teacup. Oboro's teacup. Izuku's perplexed now. Eri-chan? Ruby red eyes lift to him. Why are you putting tea in that cup? It's for the guest, the little girl tells him seriously. Are you going to move the unicorn or Midnight over so everyone has a cup and a seat? No. Eri cocks her head at Izuku before looking at the last chair at Oboro. Someone already took that seat, Zuku-ni. They need some tea. Unicorn and Midnight like sharing a seat. What? Who took the last seat? Izuku asks, reining in the hammering of his heart. Oboro had gone completely still, wide eyes on Eri. They share a brief second of eye contact before both of them are refocusing on the little girl who's now making her way back to her own chair. I don't know, Eri shrugs. But someone's there. I know it. Do you see someone? No. Can you hear someone? No. Izuku swallows, thumbing at the tiny teacup in his hand. How do you know someone's there, then? Eri simply shrugs. I just do. Now, what do we do? Izuku thinks he mumbles something about enjoying the tea and chatting, then there's something about pinkies up and they're both sipping at the tiny cups. Eri clumsily copies him, but Izuku's eyes are caught on the ghost staring right back. He doesn't know what just happened, but he doesn't draw any more attention to it. Oboro remains seated, stiffly watching the tea party. Izuku moves on autopilot when they finish their impromptu play-pretend tea, and he and Oboro trail along behind Eri as they find their way back to the kitchen. Eri says not a thing about the supposed guest in her room. She munches on a cookie Hisashi passes over and explains the concept of tea parties to the adults. Izuku silently stews over what just happened. It's so strange that he doesn't even really know if it did happen. All right, everyone. This concludes Chapter 40 of Yuuei Survival Guide. Chapter 41 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. And as always, thank you so much for listening.